In 1885, a Kansas state health official filed a report describing the typical frontier well. He noted, with the exhausted precision of a man who had said this before and expected to say it again, that the well was placed within contaminating distance of the privy. He added that convincing settlers to move either the well or the privy was nearly impossible. Not because they were stubborn, not because they were foolish, but because moving a well meant weeks of backbreaking labor, and the theory behind why it mattered, that invisible organisms in the groundwater could kill you, sounded, to most people in 1885, like something a man made up to sell you a water filter. That gap between what was killing people and what people believed was killing them is the real story of the American frontier. Not the gunfight at the OK Corral, not the outlaw on horseback. The real danger was smaller than that and closer. It was in the water you drank every morning. It was in the medicine you gave your children at night. It was in the walls of your own parlor. And here is what makes it worth knowing. The people who lived through it were not ignorant. They were operating inside a knowledge system that had not yet caught up with reality. They followed the best medical science of their time. They cleaned their homes with enormous effort. They loved their families and tried to protect them. And the tools they used to do it were poisoning them. You already know Robert Dijkstra's numbers, even if you have never heard his name. Dijkstra studied the 5 major Kansas cattle towns, Abilene, Ellsworth, Wichita, Dodge City, Caldwell, across their peak years, and counted a combined total of 45 homicides. 45. Across 5 towns, across years. Disease and accident dwarfed violence so completely that the comparison is not even close. The most dangerous thing in a frontier town was never the man with a pistol. It was the glass of water sitting on the bar next to him. The water killed in waves. Cholera, typhoid fever, dysentery. These were not occasional misfortunes. They were constants. John Unruh's study of overland emigration estimates that disease killed roughly 30,000 emigrants between 1840 and 1860, and the primary vector was contaminated water. Along the Oregon and California trails, the 1849 cholera epidemic alone took somewhere between 5 and 10,000 lives. Lodiza Frizzell, traveling the trail in 1852, recorded in her diary that her company passed fresh graves so frequently they stopped remarking on them. She noted the particular dread of water sources near campsites where previous parties had been sick. You could see the graves. You could not see what was in the water. And this is the detail that matters. Nobody was being careless. Germ theory did not achieve broad public acceptance until the 1890s. Before that, the dominant framework was miasma, the belief that disease came from bad air, from swamp gas, from the smell of decay. A well dug 20 feet from a privy did not smell wrong. The water looked clear. It tasted fine. And it carried typhoid straight into the body of every person who drank from it. Picture a frontier morning. You are standing in the kitchen of a plank-walled house somewhere in western Kansas, 1878. The stove is already hot. Coffee is in the pot, a lead-soldered tin pot that has sat on that stove for an hour, the heat pulling lead from the solder into the dark liquid ounce by ounce. You pour it into a lead-glazed ceramic cup. You drink 3 or 4 of these a day. Everyone does. Coffee is the essential beverage of the frontier, and every cup of it, served from that pot and drunk from that cup, is delivering a microdose of lead that accumulates in your bones, your kidneys, your brain. You will never connect your chronic headaches or your stomach pain to the coffee pot. You will blame hard living. You will be wrong. The canned goods on your shelf are doing the same thing. After the Civil War, canned food became a frontier staple, the technology that made provisioning possible across vast distances. But until the early 20th century, cans were sealed with lead solder, and the solder lines were rough and visible, running along the side seam and around the top. Acidic foods, tomatoes, fruits, the things your body needed most, leached lead from the solder more aggressively than anything else. The great convenience innovation of the age was a slow lead delivery system, and the families who could afford canned goods were the families getting the highest doses. Now, step from the kitchen into the parlor. If you were prosperous enough, or aspired to be, you had wallpaper. And the most fashionable color on the frontier, as in the East, was green. A vivid, brilliant, almost unnaturally intense green. Shields green and Paris green, both copper arsenite pigments, produced a color that nothing else in the period could match. In a frontier dwelling with poor ventilation and damp walls, which describes most frontier dwellings, that wallpaper released arsine gas. Slowly, constantly. The brightest, most beautiful thing in your home was gassing your family with arsenic. The symptoms were fatigue, nausea, skin lesions, numbness in the hands and feet. They came on gradually. They were attributed to seasoning. Conevery, Bolton Valencius documented how settlers understood illness as part of adapting to a new climate, a natural process the body had to endure. You were not being poisoned. You were becoming a Westerner. Your body would adjust, except it would not, because the poison was in the walls. British public health advocates had been campaigning against arsenical wallpaper since the 1860s. The knowledge existed. It just had not reached the parlor in Dodge City. This is the pattern that repeats across the entire frontier, and it is the pattern that should unsettle you. The knowledge existed somewhere. It was resisted, delayed, or simply never disseminated to the people who needed it. The gap between what experts knew and what ordinary families practiced was measured in years and thousands of miles, and people died inside that gap. Open the medicine cabinet. Every bottle on the shelf is perfectly legal. There are no labeling requirements. The Pure Food and Drug Act will not be passed until 1906, which means that for the entire classic frontier period, whatever a manufacturer chose to put in a bottle is what you get. James Harvey Young's study of patent medicines documented what was in them: opium, morphine, alcohol at concentrations of 40% or higher, mercury, arsenic, chloroform, cannabis. The 1897 Sears Roebuck catalog, the Amazon of its era, offered laudanum and products containing cocaine alongside boot polish and barbed wire. And here is where it gets quiet. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup was one of the most popular products in America. It was marketed for teething infants. The label promised relief from pain, restful sleep, a calm baby. It contained 65 milligrams of morphine per fluid ounce. Samuel Hopkins Adams, in his 1905 expose for Collier's Weekly, documented infant deaths traced to these products. The American Medical Association later compiled the evidence into a damning record. A frontier mother treating her child's cough, following the instructions on the bottle, measuring out the dose with a tin spoon by candlelight, was administering narcotics to a baby. She was doing exactly what the product told her to do. She was being a good mother, and it was killing the child she was trying to comfort. No villain in this story. No ignorance either. Just a system that had not yet learned to protect the people inside it. If you survived the medicine cabinet, you still had to survive the doctor. Mercury, in the form of calomel, mercurous chloride, was one of the most widely prescribed medicines in 19th century America. Not by quacks, by trained physicians, by the best medical minds of the period. John Harley Warner's study of American therapeutics documents calomel as the standard treatment for fevers, infections, digestive complaints, and syphilis. It was a purgative. The violent evacuation it produced Vomiting, diarrhea, was interpreted as the body-expelling disease. The physician believed he was watching the cure work. What calomel actually did was poison the patient with mercury. Chronic dosing caused salivation so severe that teeth loosened and fell out. Gums receded. Kidney damage accumulated. Neurological impairment followed. And here is the detail that lingers. The physicians who prescribed it considered the salivation a sign the medicine was working. Your teeth falling out meant you were getting better. The U.S. Army removed calomel from its official supply table in 1863, but civilian physicians kept prescribing it for decades afterward. The scholarly debate on this is genuine and uncomfortable. Were frontier doctors, on balance, helping or harming their patients? The consensus has shifted toward a hard answer. For many internal conditions, you were better off untreated than treated by a mid-19th century physician. The doctor's black leather bag, with its glass vials and lancets and paper packets of calomel, was the most professionally authoritative collection of poisons in any frontier town. Step outside. You are in the saloon now, or the courthouse lobby, or the barbershop, somewhere with a spittoon. Tobacco chewing was near universal among frontier men, and the communal spittoon was as standard a fixture as the bar itself. Brass or ceramic, stained, rarely cleaned, often overflowing onto the sawdust floor. Nancy Tomes documented what public health reformers already knew by the 1890s. The spittoon was a tuberculosis distribution hub. TB was the leading cause of death in the United States for most of the 19th century. Every man who spat into that shared receptacle, if he carried the bacillus, was seeding it into the air and surfaces of every public indoor space in town. The habit was so universal, so invisible, that when anti-spitting ordinances were finally enacted around 1900, they were mocked as government overreach. Next to the spittoon, at the town well, you would find the common cup, a single tin dipper, battered and dull, hanging on a chain. Every person in town drank from it. Children lined up at the schoolhouse pump and passed the same cup down the line. This was not laziness or poverty. Individual cups were an unimaginable luxury in a communal frontier context. The shared dipper was a communion chalice for every disease circulating in the settlement. Tuberculosis, diphtheria, influenza, skin infections, all transmitted lip to lip, hand to hand, cup to cup. Kansas became one of the first states to ban the common drinking cup, but not until 1909. For the entire frontier period, sharing was simply how you drank. If you are wondering about hand washing, nobody washed their hands after the Privy, not because they did not care about cleanliness. John Duffy's History of the American Sanitary Movement makes this clear. The fecal-oral transmission route was not widely understood until the 1880s at the earliest, and behavioral change lagged behind understanding by decades. Frontier domestic manuals, the how-to guides of the period, rarely mention hand-washing in connection with food preparation or latrine use. The result was endemic gastroenteritis, dysentery, typhoid, and parasitic infections cycling through families and communities without interruption. Combined with the contaminated water, this fecal-oral loop was likely the single largest contributor to frontier childhood mortality. More children died from it than from all the outlaws in Kansas. There is a myth the audience carries into this story, and it is worth naming. The myth says that people back then just had stronger constitutions, tougher stomachs, that they were built for hardship in a way we are not. Valencius's research dismantles this completely. Chronic illness, digestive complaints, skin conditions, and low-grade poisoning symptoms were constant and pervasive in frontier accounts. Settlers wrote about their ailments endlessly. In diaries, in letters home, in the WPA interviews decades later. They did not have stronger constitutions. They endured more. And they died from conditions we now treat with a glass of clean water and a course of antibiotics. There is a related myth about life expectancy, the claim that average life expectancy of 35 to 40 years meant people were old at 40. This misreads the statistic. Average life expectancy was dragged down catastrophically by infant and childhood mortality. A child who died at 2 and an adult who died at 68 average out to 35. An adult who survived to 20 could reasonably expect to reach 55 or 65, depending on gender and occupation. The frontier was not a place where everyone died young. It was a place where too many children never grew up. And the things that killed those children were not dramatic. They were domestic. A cup of water, a spoonful of syrup, a hand unwashed. Consider the women, not the saloon workers or schoolmarms of the mythology, but the women who did the work. Every Monday, laundry day, a frontier woman made lye soap from scratch, leaching water through wood ash to produce potassium hydroxide, a caustic chemical strong enough to strip skin. Susan Strasser's History of American Housework documents the chronic chemical burns that were a routine occupational hazard. Hands cracked, raw at the knuckles, sometimes bleeding. These wounds were then plunged back into wash water that was itself contaminated. The washerwoman's hands were not a cosmetic problem. They were open pathways for infection, repeated weekly for a lifetime. The labor that kept a family's clothes clean was destroying the hands that did it. And then there were the beauty products. This one still startles. Dr. Campbell's arsenic complexion wafers were advertised in newspapers across the frontier. The word arsenic was not hidden. It was the selling point. The marketing promise was that small doses of arsenic produced pale, clear skin, the beauty standard of the era. Women bought them by name deliberately because the beauty industry told them that poison was the price of fashionable pallor. And the pallor the arsenic produced was real. It was the pallor of arsenicosis. Lead-based face powders, mercury-based freckle removers. The cosmetics shelf was a collection of the periodic table's most dangerous elements, applied directly to the skin, day after day, year after year. One more thing was killing people, and this one happened in silence. Winter on the plains. You are inside a sod house. Walls of literal earth, grass still visible on the interior, ceiling supported by rough beams. The cast iron stove glows. The pipe runs up through the roof. Every crack in the walls and around the single door has been sealed against the cold, because a plains winter will kill you faster than anything else in this story if you let it in. The room is warm. Your family is together. And the stove, burning wood or coal or dried buffalo chips in that sealed space, is filling the room with carbon monoxide. Settler accounts describe waking with headaches, nausea, confusion during winter months. They called it winter sickness, cabin fever. Some did not wake at all. Individual fatalities from carbon monoxide poisoning in sealed frontier homes appear in coroner's records, though the mechanism was rarely identified at autopsy. The choice, if you could call it a choice, was between freezing and suffocating. And nobody knew about the second option. In 1902, Harvey Wiley, the chief chemist of the United States Department of Agriculture, began an experiment that sounds like fiction. He recruited young men to eat meals laced with the preservatives that were standard in commercial American food: borax, salicylic acid, formaldehyde, copper sulfate. The press called them the Poison Squad. Wiley called it science. The volunteers developed consistent patterns of nausea, appetite loss, and organ stress. Wiley described the American food supply as routinely adulterated in ways that constituted a public health crisis. Formaldehyde in milk to prevent souring. copper sulfate in canned peas to make them greener, borax in meat. He had to feed poison to volunteers and document their decline because nobody believed him otherwise. The Pure Food and Drug Act passed 4 years later, in 1906. For the entire frontier period before it, every family eating canned vegetables, drinking commercially preserved milk, and consuming cured meat was ingesting a cocktail of toxic preservatives with every meal. Legally, routinely, without any label telling them what was inside. If you have been counting the dangers, water, food, cookware, cans, wallpaper, medicine, the doctor, the spittoon, the shared cup, the privy, the laundry, the cosmetics, the sealed house, the preserved food, you begin to understand something the frontier itself could not. The entire material world of daily life was compromised, not by malice, not by negligence, by the simple fact that the science of toxicology, microbiology, and public health had not yet arrived at the conclusions that now seem obvious. The people who lived inside this world were not fools. They were pioneers in a very specific sense. They were the first to encounter the consequences of industrialized life without the regulatory infrastructure to manage it. The next time you turn on a faucet and drink without thinking, you are standing on the other side of a century of knowledge that was purchased in part by the people in this story. The mother with the soothing syrup, the man at the spittoon, the woman with cracked hands and a block of lye soap, the family sealed in a sod house against the January wind. They did not know, and the knowing, when it finally came too late for them. If this story showed you a frontier you had not seen before, tell us in the comments which detail stopped you, which moment made the mythology fall away and left you with the documented reality instead. We read every one, and if you want more of the real West, the version that lives in the court records and the letters and the chemistry reports, not the Hollywood version, this channel is where we do that work. Subscribe and come back for the next one. The documented frontier is stranger than the legend, and it is waiting.